You can't make this stuff up. Noah building this giant boat, an ark, in the middle of who knows where. Noah and his family being told to go out and find 2 of every kind of animal in the whole earth and then load them on that giant boat. Rain, solid rain, 40 days and 40 nights. The whole earth being engulfed in a flood. And at the peak of it, the waters reached 20 feet higher than the highest mountain peak. And it destroyed everything. Whoa. Quite a story, huh? And one that we believe, as with all these stories that we're looking at here this summer in the book of Genesis, to be about real people in real time, right here in this real world of ours. Now, just trying to imagine the size and the scope of this project that God had asked Noah to do, that in itself is mind-boggling. A boat that is 1.5 football fields long, 450 feet. It was 75 feet wide, which is wider than most of our homes are long, and 5 stories tall. And that's just what we see from the outside. Inside, there were 3 different decks of varying heights, building all these stalls for all these animals, finding a place for all the different kinds of food for the animals and the people, living quarters for Noah and the 7 other members of his family, and so much more. Whew! That's a whole nother level of trying to imagine, and to say nothing of how all of that actually got built. Now, there's plenty about this story that we really don't know. We don't know where Noah actually lived or where he built the ark. We don't know how long it took him to build it. We have no idea if he was ridiculed or persecuted, laughed at during the construction time. We don't have a loading list of exactly what animals were on the ark. Were there dinosaurs? We don't know exactly how many animals there were. And we don't have a packing list of everything else that needed to be gathered, loaded, and stored for what would amount to a 1-year adventure on that floating resort. It's mind-boggling, isn't it? There's also plenty that we do know about this story. So let's dig in and see what we can find out more about our story here in Genesis 5 through 9. So, what precipitated all of this? What led up to God flooding the whole earth? Do you remember? Think about what we just heard from the story. Basically, God was fed up. He had had enough. This is what we're told in Genesis 6. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. He'd finally had enough, and he was ready to start this all over again. I can't imagine that God hasn't felt that way multiple times throughout the course of the thousands upon thousands of years of our human history. I can't imagine that He's just been fed up with us, fed up with, tired, angered with all of the violence, the corruption, the evil, the wickedness that He was witnessing. Now, it doesn't take a whole lot to just think through a little bit of history and to come up with a few names that bring to mind acts of such corruption, such violence, such evil that is unimaginable. Listen to a few of these and think about what gets conjured up in our minds at the mere mention of these men. Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin, Pol Pot, Heinrich Himmler, Saddam Hussein, Idi Amin, Ivan the Terrible, the dictators of North Korea, grandfather, father, and now son, Kim Jong-un, Ayatollah Khomeini, Nero, Genghis Khan, Mao Zedong, and that's enough, right? That is enough. Ruthless, heartless, brutal murderers of millions upon millions of people. I cannot imagine the anger that God must feel and the heartache that He must feel as well over all of this evil that He's witnessed. But the thing is, it's not just dictators like those of the past and present, but even the smallest acts of evil and sin that flow from our mouths and from our hearts and the times that we're living in, whether we're talking about the racial tensions, the racial violence and injustice, politicizing all the things around this pandemic, domestic violence, or even gossiping about the people we know in our lives. All of it is an abomination to God. Now, we've got to jump to the end of the story to understand fully why God didn't just wipe out all of this over and over again. After flooding the earth and destroying everything, God made a promise. He made a covenant to Noah and to us. Hear this in chapter 9. God said, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature on earth. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I'm making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So, rather than destroy His creation again and again, He chose to be patient, long-suffering, and merciful. That's a gift to us, a gift He's given, that He doesn't just out and out destroy us, wipe us out time and again. And it's a gift to us with all that we find ourselves facing in our own lives and all that's going on in this world when it comes to the evil and the wickedness, the corruption, the violence, for us to understand who our God is and the choice that He made. At the time of the flood, Noah apparently was the exception to all of this corruption, all of this wickedness, and all of this evil. We're told this about Noah in chapter 6, verse 9. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. So God asked Noah, or He tasked him with this particular job, specific instructions to build the ark and to fill it. But even Noah was not this perfect saint. So don't even go there. And honestly, I hate even bringing this up, but I've got to. And no, you can't make this stuff up. Not long after Noah and his family had come off the ark, after all that God had done for Noah, the covenant that He made with him, we're told Noah was a man of the soil. And so one of the first things he did was plant a vineyard. And once that vineyard had grown up and borne fruit, we're told at the end of chapter 9 that Noah got drunk on the wine and ended up passed out, naked in his tent. And one of his sons happened to walk in on him. And out of that came no lack of problems and trouble from that point forward. It just never ends. And on this side of heaven, as Paul so eloquently and truthfully puts it, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God in Romans 3. And in Romans 6, the wages of sin is death. We live under the covenant of the rainbow. No, not what the rainbow has come to be understood in today's culture. But we find ourselves under the covenant of the rainbow, the covenant of God's promise, never to destroy this creation again by the waters of a flood, but instead His promise to be patient and long-suffering and merciful. And all of this, it was yet another pointer to Jesus, a pointer to how God's love, His mercy, and His grace would play out in real terms. You see, God promised never again to destroy His creation by the waters of a flood, but instead, God would choose to destroy His own Son. That destruction of His Son, Jesus' death on the cross, His sacrifice, payment for our sin, our rebellion, our evil, corruption, wickedness, and violence. That's what restores us. Through the destruction of God's own Son, He would restore us and ultimately would restore all of creation, bringing hope back to us and back to this world, especially bringing hope back into what can at times seem to be these very hopeless and discouraging situations that we are living in today. Now, the beauty the beauty of what we see and hear in this story of Noah and the flood is the love that God still has for His creation. He hasn't given up on it. He hasn't given up on us. We hear in the Noah story, after the 40 days and 40 nights of the rain, and then the 150 days that they were just floating out there, in chapter 8, verse 1, God remembered Noah and all that were with him in the ark, and He sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. God didn't just leave Noah and his family and all the animals out there floating across the earth until they all died. No. God was ready. He was ready to start again, to begin this new creation. Again and again, throughout this Noah and the ark and the flood story, we hear these echoes from Genesis 1 and 2. Echoes of Noah, of human beings being created in the very image of God. We hear God's command to Noah and all the animals as they came out of the ark, that they were to be fruitful and multiply and fill all the earth. Sound familiar? New creating, new life, grace, mercy, love, redemption. All integral parts of this story, and all of it points us to Jesus. St. Peter writes about this story of Noah in his first letter to those Christians who were suffering and struggling throughout the world because of their faith. And he connects this Noah story with baptism and our Lord's ongoing work of recreation, new creation work in us. He said this, that ark and those floodwaters, they symbolize baptism that now saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. A gift, another gift of God's continuing grace as He lays claim to us in our baptism, continuing to make us new, continuing to forgive us, to love us, to restore us, to redeem us. As Noah's first act coming out of that ark was to build an altar, make sacrifice, and worship the Lord, so we continue to worship Him today. Whether we do that virtually, as we have been over these last months, or in person, as we will start to do again this coming Sunday, we come to receive His grace, to receive His forgiveness, to be made new time and time again by His hand and by His promise, providing for us all that we need and can find nowhere in this world but in Jesus. And for us to be able to respond with our thanks and our praise and our gratitude to God for all that He has poured into us and for all that He continues to do. Now, what do we do with all this? That's what now for this week. A couple of things I would encourage you to be thinking about. First of all, prepare to start transitioning to in-person worship next week or to join us via our new live stream. And second, keep the Noah story in mind this week, and specifically, be cognizant of how through baptism, God has laid claim to you, that He loves you and has made you His new creation. Go in peace, my friends, and live in that love that the Lord has poured in to you. Amen.